Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll probably give it maybe one more minute before we kick off. I'm Rachel. I'm Program Director here at Antler. I'm joined by the lovely Rani, who is Program and Community down in Melbourne. I'm based up in Sydney. And two that we've prepared earlier with Tim from Factory AI and Alex from Auric. So we'll just keep letting people join and get started in a couple of seconds. So what we're going to do is run through a little bit of a welcome to Antler, pretty light touch, and welcome any questions either within this session or post this. Both Rani and I will have our LinkedIn in the chat later. And then we'll dive into the fun stuff and what you're all here to hear about as a founder journey and transitioning from engineer to founder in 10 weeks, which is crazy if you think about it. So, Rani, let's get started. We'll move across to who we are at a
Let's
snapshot.
do it.
So, in Australia, we've got some pretty impressive stats. We've been backing the world's most driven founders from day zero to greatness since 2019. So, that's nearly 1,100 founders supported. As of this week, 300 plus founders invested in 145 plus portfolio companies, and we're now live in 3 locations, Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Next slide, please. And here's us at a global snapshot, which is what everybody likes to come to Antler for. So we're live in 27 cities. Our global portfolio has nearly 1,200 companies with a total portfolio value of nearly $4 billion and with a total of just over 900 million raised across all of those locations. If we look into Australia a little bit more, you may recognize a face on there with a slightly different haircut. So we have Tim joining us today from Factory AI, as I mentioned. And this is how our founders are sort of broken down into 3 categories. While we don't like putting people in boxes, this is sort of how we do segment people. So we have our tech and product builders, our business and operations people, and our domain experts. So I'll pull on a couple of those. So Ben, the CEO of Authentified, he was a generalist but with deep retail domain expertise. Look them up; they are going fantastically at the moment. They're in a finalist competition for Vogue in Switzerland, I believe, Rani, or something silly like that. And Renee is a domain expert for Altai. She was a casting and talent manager for about 15 years before jumping onto Altai and launching Altai, which is an end-to-end casting platform for TV and movies, which is also doing great guns. They've expanded already into Mexico and looking at US next, and the business is about 2.5 years old. Next slide, please. Here's a bit of a snapshot of our Australia portfolio, and just to sort of ideally highlight that we're very agnostic into what we invest into. Obviously, yes, there's a lot of B2B SaaS products, but we've also been investing in ed tech, prop tech, health tech, green tech, consumer tech. Auric, you are in there. I have updated that, and the likes. And I'm assuming that ML AI box is going to get much larger by this time next year. Next slide, please. This is just a slightly complicated overview of what residency and our entire process looks like. So broken up into sort of 3 categories. So we have our selection and interview process and onboarding. We have residency, which is kind of in formation and validation and due diligence. And then once you move across into our portfolio, the portfolio team get on hand and start working with our investments on their next round of fundraising and helping navigate those milestones and growth projections. The other fun thing that we released last year was our agreement of rolling capital. So once we invest, Antler likes to be the first check, but once we invest, we do have our ARC, which means that post Antler check, you will go and secure a minimum of $300,000 elsewhere with our assistance, and we commit to a third of whatever that round is. So if it's a nice big $3 million round, that's $1 million from us, committed before you even start having those conversations. The amount of fundraising activity that has occurred since we launched this agreement last year is significant, and has really started accelerating a lot of our more recent investments, last year's investments, into their growth trajectory. Final slide, just a little bit more on the global part of why Antler is amazing. So what sits on top of all of the regional funds is our Elevate Fund or Global Access Fund. So when some of our businesses are looking to expand into new territories or raise Series A or beyond, we have that fund to be able to draw down from as well. And I think that's all from the welcome to Antler stuff. Let's get stuck into the fun stuff, which is what we're all here to do. So I'd love to introduce you to, as I mentioned, Tim, CTO from Factory AI, and Alex, CTO from Auric. Let's kick off with Tim. We'll start with you. Can you share a little bit about your background before joining Antler, and how did you hear about us? Why did you come to us?
Thanks, Rach. Hi, everyone. My name's Tim. I am the CTO of Factory AI. So I'll answer the second question first, because I think that's quite relevant to what you were talking about, the Antler reach around the world. So before joining Antler and starting Factory AI, I lived in the UK for 10 years, and there I met a few founders from the European portfolio. This was at actually a growth equity event at one of the AWS events that I used to work at. I was speaking to a founder there, and they got me really interested in Antler. So that's how I found out about Antler, and just it's yeah, the reach of Antler is real, right? Across multiple different continents. So it's pretty cool to see that. And then, yeah, what's my background? So my background has always been in tech, in various different roles. I've worked in all different parts of the software development lifecycle. Most recently, before Factory I was an architect at AWS. And I think that allowed me to really build the skills to transition to being a founder. It put me in, I guess, what you would say as like a customer engineer. So working alongside a lot of customers, solving big, hairy problems for enterprises in the manufacturing space. And that's kind of how we found the problem.
Awesome. That's a good opener. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to throw to you same question.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, for me, so I studied mechatronics engineering. So I had much more of a focus on hardware, which coming into the startup space seemed to be a bit more of a niche than I had thought at the time. But yeah, basically started my career as a project engineer working on production lines in the food packaging industry. And then probably the last 4 or 5 years working in startups. Most recently, last 4 years as a founding employee for a startup based in Melbourne, building robots for underwater asset inspections. And I think throughout those 4 or 5 years of roles that I had, they were always very autonomous. And I never, whilst I did have a CEO and a CTO to answer to in those roles, they gave me the freedom to make decisions and wear multiple hats. And that's something that I really fell in love with. And I think what led me to eventually becoming the founder of my own company is that I never really answered to anybody directly. And I found something really invigorating and exciting about that. Whilst it was also very, very stressful, it meant that autonomy really provided a big challenge. And so, yeah, that combined with just a desire to always be kind of learning new things and playing in new spaces meant that I think founding a company was inevitable for me. And I think I came across the Antler advertisement either on LinkedIn or somewhere, and sort of inquired into it, thought, oh, this is, kind of a pretty intriguing thing. And I think for an engineer as well, not really having the business acumen, it was really suited to me because Antler really portrayed itself as this sort of step-by-step process for founding a company. So sort of follow this formula and you'll come out of it as a founder. And at least for me, it worked, and it was something that was really, really, really helpful for my journey.
Awesome, thank you. And you're welcome to turn your cameras on. Maxim, thank you for being brave. Appreciate you. It is slightly daunting speaking to a wall of black faces. Otherwise, it's just us four having a very intimate chat in front of everybody. Alex, we'll stick with you then. What are you building today, from underwater robots to?
Yeah, so I co-founded a company called Auric Essentials with my co-founder Adam. So Adam was also part of Antler, obviously, and he came into our cohort with this idea, which he'd been working on for a couple of years, and was looking for a technical co-founder to help him build the technology. So our core tech, well, at its core is a smart waterless oil diffuser, which basically leverages personalized scent experiences to enhance daily routines and mood. So the whole hypothesis of the company was built around this idea that scent is a very powerful sense, and one that is linked very strongly to memories and can be used as a trigger for different mood states. And almost everyone has some kind of scent or aroma that can tie to a certain memory. For me, it's the smell of eucalyptus when I was a kid. Sick with a cold, mum would put eucalyptus oil or Vicks vapor up on my chest, and that's a very strong sense. So the thesis that we have is that you can leverage this using on-demand scent to help enhance and switch to different mood states.
Awesome. And just, I guess, for clarification, because both have been on or it got invested in last year, and Tim is one we prepared a little bit earlier. So, Alex, last year you received investment in September, October?
Yeah, we received November last year.
November last year. Awesome, thank you. And Tim, tell us about Factory AI and when you received investment from us.
Yeah, so Factory AI, we work with manufacturers to solve to make AI essentially accessible to all of them. Previously, AI was really reserved for your tier ones, your top 100 kind of global companies, your BMWs, your massive kind of manufacturers, right? So we're trying to make that so you don't have it's teams of data scientists working that. The specific problem we solve today right now is it's a predictive maintenance solution. So a lot of manufacturers, you have a lot of machines, a lot of assets that run continuously, 24/7, and they don't know when it's going to fail. So by leveraging sensors and collecting that data, running them through some AI and ML models, we're able to predict ahead of time, sometimes weeks and months ahead, that this machine is going to fail. And when we do see these anomalies, we contextualize it with other data as well to say it's a bearing failure. We've seen this problem or these different pattern before. We think that you haven't lubricated it correctly, something along those lines. We received investment beginning of 2023. I think that was our cohort. We've actually received the follow-on investment as well last year. So that does work, and it's true. What Rachel said is true. You do get extra money.
Well, I don't know if anyone saw, but we did close 77 million last year, so we have money to spend. Tim, obviously you're a little bit further along in the post Antler investment journey. Love to hear a little bit about some of the milestones that you're most proud of that you and JP, have achieved.
Yeah, I think the first one we definitely celebrated was closing our first customer. That's always a very sweet one. First enterprise customer, right? So they take a long time the deals take a long time to go through, especially as a startup and you're trying to work with this big company. They don't know whether you're going to be around for the next year or not, or next few months even. And I think even back in the beginning of 2023, it was pretty tough, right? People were pulling back on a lot of different budgets and even the investment, right? It was hard for us to raise money at that time. So that was one thing we definitely celebrated. We've just passed 10 customers, and we recently just got back from a trip from Tasmania where we saw pretty much the entire value stream of how salmon is made. So went to a farm where they've got 10 million salmon there. We see them walk all the way till they grow up and turn into different products, and the entire life cycle, right? So that was a whirlwind tour of
That's cool.
which was fun. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a little bit of a recent celebration. Yeah.
Awesome. And Alex, obviously you're a little bit newer in your post-Antler investment journey, but I know you've had some decent, fun milestones post-Antler investment. I'd love to hear about those.
Yeah, so last few months for us have been quite busy. So we launched our pilot program a few months ago. So for those not aware, when you're building hardware startups and hardware, it's not nearly as simple as software where you can put out a half-finished product and iterate over time and sort of remotely issue updates. For us, we need to build a product or a prototype that we knew was going to survive, because as soon as it left our hands, there was no way for us to
Mm,
update. So it took a little bit longer than the typical software startup. So for us, getting those first units out was a huge milestone, and seeing them online and seeing users actively engaging in the product was awesome. And even today, I still find myself checking multiple times a day, seeing these devices going off and the oils being used, and it's just a really cool feeling. Um, but also too, we've just closed our first B2B customer as well. So getting these devices in retail stores is awesome, and we're on the verge of closing a second as well. So there's little wins along the way that really motivate you to keep going with what you're doing. You'll have your massive milestones when you close funding, for example.
sure.
But it's the little ones as well that you really got to cherish, because those are the things that become memorable on this journey.
Awesome. Speaking of memorable, we'll say the Auric business card is the best one to date. Everyone got little bottles of scent. I've still got two of mine just sitting over there. So just for future reference. Let's dive a little bit more into my favorite part of Antler, residency. So Tim obviously went through in 2023, and we have made a few changes, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your experience in residency, what was surprising, and also around the co-founder matching piece of sort of how you found JP.
Yeah. So JP is the CEO of Factory Eye. He's the other half of Factory Eye. How did I find the residency? Wow, it's been a while, but I still
No,
remember it, right?
good.
First day, it's really buzzing. That's the only word that I can really think of, right? You're in a room with another 100 entrepreneurs, and I think everyone is excited about like what's going to happen over the next 10 weeks or so, right? Uh, I think after a few days, you start to, after you've met, like had an opportunity to have, lots of coffees, lots of discussions with lots of different people, you start to form an idea of what different ideas are around, who is a commercial founder, who's a domain expert, who's a tech founder.
Hmm.
And then you kind of split off into different groups, and you work on like mini problems, I think, is for lack of a better word. Like you might have a more formal way of calling the little exercises that you run, but it's really to get you to think like, how could you work with this person long term? And I think the things that really stuck out for me, at least in the case of someone like JP, is it was from the get-go. It was clear that he was a really clear thinker, and he
Hmm.
was able to articulate his point of view very well. And then also he was open to hearing the opinion of others.
Yeah.
And he, to me, it felt like he was playing a long-term game. And I think for me, when you want to start a company with someone, this is not for 1 year, 2 years. It's
Yep.
10 years, right? So you want to play long-term games with long-term people, essentially. And I think that's the kind of people that you're trying to figure out who is in it for the long shot, who is going to be at the bottom when you're like rock bottom with you and going to fight their way out with you, right? So that's kind of like what my mindset was thinking through it.
Hmm.
There were lots of different people, lots of different ideas that we went through as well. I kind of treat it like I like to use mental models. So this two-way door analogy, you've probably heard it
Hmm.
before. So essentially, open a door, look through it. If you don't like what you see, close it and go back out. So I think the entire process, the entire 10-week program is an exercise of how many doors you can go through.
Hmm.
So just iterate and experiment quickly, make really quick decisions, see what's on the other side, and keep going.
Awesome, thank you. Alex, to your experience, as I mentioned before, everyone jumped on the call. We made a few changes to programs since Tim went through, but also what I'd like to hear about is because Adam obviously came in with Auric and was very, very fixed. So I'd like to hear about obviously residency experience, what surprised you, but also what drew you to Auric and co-founding with Adam.
Mm. Yeah, well, I came into Antler with a different idea, and I actually had not intended at all to be founding a hardware startup. I was in many ways kind of fatigued from my time as an employee in my previous role, from building hardware, and I thought, okay, it's time to do something a little bit easier. But I think the beauty of the Antler cohort is it sort of gave me an opportunity to really flex my muscles in what I was actually good at. I will have to admit, the first few days were very, very daunting. We flew up to the whole cohort of, I think, 65, 66 people. And I think, especially for me, an introvert and a hardware engineer, it's almost like everyone was speaking a different language. And it was quite a challenge those first couple of days, to the point where I was like, maybe this isn't not quite for me. But I sort of persevered and got through those first few days and really started to kind of lean into what I was my strengths. And I know we had a few um, pitches that we had to do as part of the program that first week, where we had to find a problem, find a solution. And one of them lent heavily into, I think it was renewable energy, I think, or battery tech. And that was where I was like, actually, I do have a lot of value here. Having a different perspective as an engineer, coming in from that the more of logic, maths, data driven perspective versus some of the business guys who come from a very different world. So yeah, leaning into that, I really felt comfortable and found my niche. And then eventually met Adam through one of those tasks. And we pretty much clicked straight away. So he having more of the marketing business sense and me more of the engineering sense. We found we complemented each other's skill sets quite well. And then over the next 5-6 weeks, it was a case of really sussing each other out in more detail. Can we make this relationship work? Because it is very much you're almost getting married to this person. You spend a lot of time with this person, so you want to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that drew me to Adam was that he has this insane ability to attract talent to him. So the advisors that he had, not so we didn't have any employees, or didn't have any employees, but he did have a strong group of advisors that were supporting him over the last couple of years. And I just found it just insane how he was able to bring all these people on board and win them over with his vision for the company. And that was something that was definitely very, very attractive and one of the deciding factors when I decided to join as well.
Awesome. And so back to you, Tim, because I do remember your journey. Initially you and JP did team up pretty early on, but the first pitch you did was a JP idea before you went to Factory AI. So I'd love to hear a little bit more around how did you go about figuring out what to work on, and also not what to work, like what to not work on, like how did you kill things,
Yeah.
for lack of a better
Great
phrasing.
question. Yeah, I think ideas there's plenty of ideas out there essentially, but this is essentially talking about the validation part of different ideas. And I think the way to think about it is like looking back hindsight, right? Like why, like at that point in time, we were kind of like, well, why did we pick Factory AI? And we didn't know like the specific reason where we could pinpoint it at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I look back at it, it's definitely around the problem market fit. So this is a framework by Brown Balfour. So if you can look him up, it's called the four fits. And you want to find a problem which is painful with a large enough market, right? And so when we went with both of these different ideas, we went to talk to customers or prospects, right? And we tried to score all the different conversations we have with all these different prospects to understand, is this a painful problem? And are a large number of customers experiencing this? Can we see any patterns around this? Uh, we think that, like, I don't know, where we somehow we spoke to more people on the factory AI side, and that kind of stuck with us. But we didn't know that was the kind of, like, this was the thing, like, the kind of problem market fit, right? So that's the reason why we ended up going with Factory AI as opposed to, it was like a sales enablement or sales something
Yeah.
along that line.
Yeah, it was definitely a JP. Yep,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, awesome. And so for you, Alex, with jumping on to Auric, which obviously does have the hardware but a software component, can you talk me through, I guess, some of the learnings and surprises that you had from joining that? Because obviously you developed a like really good connection with Adam, liked what he was doing, but just on the sort of the more practicalities of like using your skills.
Yeah, I think yeah, it was quite a challenge jumping on board
Mm,
in with because there was a tech stack that existed already, and trying to get my head around what had already been built took quite a long time. Um, but again, it's sort of being confident in leaning into your skill set, and knowing that you're now the subject matter expert of this company. So be confident in making the big decisions. And I think it
mm,
took a while, especially coming in to such a mature company already. Sort of being comfortable saying this is now, I'm now co-owner of this company, and I'm now
yeah,
co-decision maker as well. And Adam was really good at sort of supporting that and encouraging that. But it's definitely something that took a bit of time to
mm,
become accustomed to. And then also realizing that you're now a boss, and you've got not necessarily employees, but you've got contractors or other people to now instruct. It adds a separate layer of complexity to your role. It's no longer just about building product. It's about admin. It's about managing. It's about all these other things as well, payroll. So all those fun things that come along with being a founder that don't really get talked about, but they need to be done. They need to get done, otherwise the company just stops
yeah.
operating.
On that, and I'm sorry, Rani, and I apologize every time in these AMAs for everybody that's joining the call. I go completely rogue and
Good.
just
That's
have a
why I didn't know.
conversation. um, so on that, Alex, what's actually surprised you about some of the other tasks outside of your normal lane that you've actually really enjoyed learning or leaning into? You can, if
Um,
there's none, you can say none.
yeah, I might have to sit on that one for a little bit. Yeah, I
That's
might have to
fair.
come back
That's
on
fair. That's
that one.
fair. I threw that out of nowhere. I do see that there's a few things coming in through the chat. So, and I do want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to ask Alex and Tim, for their own personal situation. So, just want to kind of round off the antler-led stuff with, if you were sitting on this call it 6 months before your antler program, what would you like? I'm going to throw to you, Tim. It's probably harder for you because it's been a little bit longer. But what would you value hearing, looking to be like being an engineer, looking to be a founder?
Ooh, being an engineer or founder. I think it's really there is no one way to build a startup. There are so many different ways. I think what we hear about in mass media and just in general are all the success stories. Go big or
Yeah,
go home, right? You can still build a very successful company that if you exit after, there's many different exit strategies as well. But if it's $100 million company and you own 10% versus a
hmm,
$1 billion company, you own 1%, right? When you think about that latter stage, there's so much more complexity,
yeah,
so much more stress, but you still own your exit is still the same, right? So also think about, like, there's different venture capital firms who, like your Sequoias, your really, really big firms, right? Those are tier one investors. There's also different tier investors as well,
yep,
right? I didn't know that coming into Antler. I think you always it's kind of, that was something that I wish I knew beforehand, because you can then structure your company in a very different way. You can structure approach in a very different way as well. So that's one thing I wish I knew. I think the other things that I wish I was more prepared for was really around the commercial side of things, and even just like kind of understanding deeply what product market fit was and how to go about that. I think, yeah, you can always learn by doing like I guess like a trial by fire. That's what we're doing.
Yep.
Learn as you go. That's the best way. But I think you can still come prepared with, a few ideas, have your policies, have your different things you want to try out very quickly. If I was to rebuild Factory AI today, essentially, in other words, I definitely wouldn't build any solution. I would go out and figure out, is there a market need for this? Is there a market for this problem?
Mm-hmm.
And there's many different ways you can do that.
Yep, that's so true. It's so interesting when particularly people with technical background do go, everyone's going to want this, I'm going to build this, and they've not spoken to a single person. And you can save yourself a lot of time and heartbreak for speaking to people first. Alex, I'd love to hear the same response from you.
Yeah. So
Oh, not response, sorry, the same question.
yeah, cool. I think, yeah, for me, it was, it can be incredibly daunting to get started. Even just putting the application in was like, I think I was halfway through the application before I hit submit, and it was only being prompted by one of the Antler staff via LinkedIn that I actually completed the application. So I think the big learning for me, and something I'd pass on to anyone, is just take the first step. I think whether it's sending that email, whether it's putting the application, and then just sort of like in some ways, let fate sort of do its thing. So sort of an example of like, trying to validate an idea. It's as simple as just like sending one email out to a potential customer or client, and just seeing what the vibe is or what comes back from that. It's pretty surprising from my experience. It's very surprising how much progress you can make just from like one email, one application. And this whole idea that I like to play around with is sort of outsourcing accountability. So for anyone that struggles to actually hold themselves to account to actually doing things, find programs or find people that can hold you accountable. So for me, it was Antler. So once I was accepted into the Antler cohort, I knew, okay, I need to actually, crack on with this. Otherwise, I'm going to make a fool of myself and I'm going to waste the opportunity. So just really like, yeah, it's really as simple as just do anything to get started. And just get that ball rolling. And as soon as that ball starts rolling, it's very surprising how quickly you can gain momentum on an idea or in heading in a new direction for yourself.
Just on that before, and I know I said I was going to throw over, but just it raises an interesting point for me. I'd love to hear, and because it was obviously a lot more recent for you, Alex, around your due diligence experience, because so obviously, or maybe not so obviously, residency is halved into formation and validation. So that's all the fun stuff. You find your co-founder, you play with things, you break things, you figure out what you're going to work on. And once that's kind of confirmed, you move into our due diligence phase where it's very much under pressure, limited time, coaching, and everything. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Alex, and what you, particularly for something that is hardware, is hard to do quickly. Your experience during that 5 weeks.
Yeah, well, first thing I would say is don't book any overseas holidays during that time. I think I was overseas in Europe for 4 of those 5 weeks, and Adam was in Japan for 3
You
of those.
were. That's why I called on you
So
for that.
it made things a lot harder when we went in the same country uh, for any point of that. But yeah, for due diligence for us was quite challenging because again, building hardware, we didn't have the ability to gain sort of that validation from customers by using a product like a SaaS product or a software product might. So for us, it was very much building a wait list, getting MOUs, and MOUs with customers, and just basically finding any way possible to prove traction. So prove that people wanted this product and needed this product. and very much also going back to first principles and just like, having conversations with individuals and structuring the questions you were asking in such a way that you weren't leading them on. And I guess this leans a little bit into what we were talking about before, with like technical guys tend to lean into solutions,
Yep.
and not actually thinking about the problem. So what that can result in is when you are talking to customers, you can also often have leading questions that you're trying to get a certain outcome from that validates the solution that you've built. But in actuality, you want to be validating the problem. So it was quite a challenging 5 weeks, but it's really it's whatever you can do to prove traction, whatever cost.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I will throw open, I know, Tim, that you did answer that in the chat, but just in case no one's monitoring that, I think it would be useful. So Jonas has asked, what is your recommended approach for validating market need? You have given a little bit there, but would you mind fleshing it out for us, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's many different approaches on validating market need. I think the first thing you need to think about is whether you're selling to, or whether you think the problem you're solving for is for a consumer, whether it's a business, and then thinking about if it's a business, what is the model? Is it going to be some sort of enterprise type offering? Is it like a product that they can buy on the website, just simply put in your email and credit card, that sort of scenario? So that's product-led growth. And depending on what you're kind of thinking, is like that, you might have a hypothesis. So we have two products out, and this is an example. So our predictive maintenance product is aimed at enterprise customers. So we have a very different kind of validation approach versus our new product, which is called Prevent. Prevent. And that is all built around product-led growth. So we redid our website. We have spent a lot of time on SEO. We're doing a lot of LinkedIn outreach for that. Whereas for enterprise, you're just really trying to cold call. You're trying to talk to stakeholders and do as many site visits as you can. So for us, site visit is visiting a factory, visiting a plant, wherever, right? Getting to the customers, getting face to face. And yeah, that's how we go about validating the market need. I think Andrew asked a really good follow-up question on that. And it comes down to what Alex was saying around the questions you ask. You want to validate the problem and you want to ask open-leading questions. But I think also there's an opportunity here to showcase something to really whet their appetite, whether it's a prototype or an MVP. It can be built very quickly and with minimal kind of time. So think about building prototypes in hours and building MVPs in days, right? We did that with our Prevent product, which is that product-led growth one. And the reaction that you're looking for customers and why we started to spend more effort on this is people who start to say, oh, where do I sign up? How do I pay you? All that kind of stuff, right? Take my money. Those are the types of responses you were looking for, as opposed to what I think you mentioned, it's a great idea kind of thing. If you're getting a great idea, that's also a good sign, right? It's a good sign that this is probably not a painful enough problem and to maybe go back to the drawing board, right? It's all an experiment.
Yep, that's great. Stephen, I know you've put it in your chat, but I could hear you typing it. So if you want to come off mute, you're welcome to ask.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry.
Are we having tech gremlins? Yeah, we can hear you, but very faintly.
So like I'm a carpenter by trade. So like I work in tier 1. And so this year, like legislation that came in from the federal government, and like what I wanted to do was, like, I love tech and like I'm into computers and that, right? So I wanted to figure out what was the one thing that the industry needed that didn't have, that could help with the new legislation and that. So I always started my approach with what was a problem that I could solve, and like that was it basically. Like what can I solve? Like I worked out what it was, and then like I've been building that as a SaaS, and like very green in this sort of area. Like I'm a carpenter by trade. Like I spend my life on site. You know what I mean? Wake up at 4 o'clock and get home late and long hours. And for me, I had to make the approach where I could do something that when I did something, I wanted to make a difference. Like, I didn't want to just put something out there that was like, yeah, some people might want, some don't. But so like what I came up with was like something that sort of like helps subbies, builders, suppliers, developers, estimators, to where they can all use it to make like their everything that they do better, really. Like because it's with carbon, so like it's covered in like the carbon that they got to report your carbon in that now for like mid
Mm.
the life size tiered companies and that. So I really wanted to work in that direction. So
So I think what you're trying to ask is how do you, while you're still trying to figure out the problem to solve, how do you go about validating it without having really anything to show for what you're trying to
yeah,
solve?
yeah,
Gotcha.
like yeah. So like I sort of worked around a bit. Like so I got put onto use by a guy that I was actually going to Antler by. I started putting the feelers out there, and like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people just want you to pay a lot of money, and like this one guy recommended Antler, and then like I'll give him a word. Like last Thursday or Friday, I sent an email. I put in the application, and like they contacted me immediately, asked for a
Oh yeah,
resume.
we
Yeah, it
move
was good.
things pretty quickly.
I was stoked, and then this was available, and you know what I mean. So
Oh good.
to
Welcome.
me, it was like,
Welcome.
yeah. So this moves real quick. Like it's more than like they want to develop it and stuff like that. There, like I've got to work a prototype, but like which I made myself, and then
Mm.
I had like he had like a video interview of him on Friday. So I don't know why my camera's not working. And
That's
then
okay. That's okay.
sorry, and then basically just you know what I mean shared the screen and went through it with him, and like he was like, it's not what they really do, what I was asking for.
Yeah.
Like he was actually pretty surprised with what I've done. You know what I mean, especially with my technical background being I'm a carpenter, so like
Yeah.
um
Look, I think, I mean, that whole sort of like ideation, showing what you've been building and having it sort of rough and ready is a bit of a process. I think Tim, I'd love to hear because obviously with Oracle's it's slightly different product. So Tim, in the very early days of Factory AI, where you didn't necessarily really have anything, how did you go about like showing your thinking in a sort of a, whether it's prototype, MVP, whatever?
Yeah, super great question, Rachel. So at the very early days, we held off on, so throughout this 10-week program in Antler, we didn't write a single line of code.
Mm-mm.
We used Figma to build a prototype, or we did some whiteboarding with some customers, essentially. So yeah, you don't need to have anything built. But because we were building for enterprise, right? And when you build for enterprise, you actually have a good opportunity not to have a product. And you can kind of structure it in a way where you are looking for design partners. And so essentially you're
Yeah.
collaborating with your future customers to build out your product. And they will be your early users as well. So that was the approach we took. We were fortunate enough to find some of these design partners and build out the first version of our product without
Mm-hmm.
having to write a single line of code during that 10-week period when we're like in deep due diligence and trying to really figure out, is this the right problem to solve? Is this a potential solution that is going to work? And I guess the way to measure that, Alex mentioned about traction. So we were looking for LOIs, we were looking for pilots and design partners and prototype. Essentially, do we have a live pilot? So are we actively working with this customer to build out the MVP essentially?
Yeah, awesome. And I guess too, for you, Alex and Auric, I've seen the prototype. She's not as pretty as what was in the IC pitch deck. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about because a lot of it was hypothetical. This is what it will be.
Yeah.
How did you both kind of go about, yeah, validating that with your customers, particularly in the B2B space?
Yeah, it's there's always that tendency to start or wanting to build something that is the amazing gold standard product from day one.
Yeah.
And you're always talking about how you want this feature and this feature and this feature. but it's just not realistic early days when you have, limited funding, you've got limited manpower. So you really need to be brutal with what you want to include in your minimum viable product. And it really doesn't need to be the glitz and glam, flashy final product that you're going to be selling and that we had in our pitch decks, all those renders. It really just needed to have the basic functionality of what you were trying to achieve, so that you could prove that people wanted it. And the best way to build that is to build it alongside your customers, like Tim mentioned, is speak to them and see what they are actually wanting. Don't make assumptions, because assumptions can also be costly when you start building something that you realize people don't actually want. So for us, it was very much getting buy-in from our customers, so our B2C customers and our B2B customer as well, getting buy-in with the idea that they're building this alongside us. This is their product. We want their feedback because we want this to reflect what they actually want. So when you get that buy-in from them, it actually becomes a lot easier. And when they buy in, it's like every piece of feedback you get is honest, true feedback. And it's so helpful to make sure you build something that customers want.
I'm not gonna lie, while she's not as pretty as the end product is going to be, the working prototype was very functional. The Antler office, it smelled amazing for an entire week. And that's a big space to fill too.
I'll bring in our new prototype.
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes,
Belfer, there's absolutely time for more questions. We've got another 11 minutes up our sleeve, but while unless you want to come off mute.
We got a question from Andrew there around runway, around budgeting and plan on the runway. We want to pick that up first.
Yeah, that's what okay. So obviously when you're building something out, and it stands for both of you for different reasons, and it will take longer than you anticipated. How do you budget? How do you plan for runway? How do you explain holdups to people that are counting on you to release things? Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I don't know if we're a good example of this. We ran out of money and we ended up putting our own money into the company. So be prepared if you're willing to go on this journey, I guess, is to put some skin in the game, right? And I think investors also see that as something it's quite good as well, right? But yeah, I think the way that we think about, and I think this is credit to JP as well, is we set ourselves really good goals and milestones every quarter. And if we hit these, then we know that we're on target to, continue to live. So we've recently actually just passed, and maybe this is a milestone we should celebrate, is like being default alive, right? So we make as much money as we're spending at the moment. So I think that was one of our big goals that we were going for, and how we go about doing that is essentially like trying to find more and more customers to build with. So I think more tangibly, Andrew, for us at Factory AI, we try to de-risk what we were doing by building like this design partnership. I think it's something that shouldn't be underestimated, especially if you're building with enterprise customers, because it will take a long time. And we have had holdups for a long time, like 6 months, trying to get IT to do something, trying to get through procurement, all these other things, right? I think be prepared for all of that. What are the lessons from that though, really? Is I think you probably want to find and build up more of your pipeline, first of all. So on the sales side, just have more opportunities to kind of de-risk that. And I think second of all, focus more effort on customers who are willing to move quickly to help you move quickly as well. If we had known that before, maybe we wouldn't have had to put in our own money, but I think it's all worked out in the end anyway.
It'll come back. It'll come back when we all make squillions of dollars. Counting on you. Alex, I know you're a little bit newer into that journey, but it is a hardware business. So love to hear about your insights on that.
Yeah, I actually think it's this great fallacy that anyone can kind of predict and put an accurate timeline and budget on a startup. I don't think, and I think Adam shares this sentiment with me, it's not really possible to accurately predict, because by the nature of what you're doing, you're innovating, and the nature of that means that we don't actually know how long something's going to take. There's always going to be delays out of your control, whether it's, for example, COVID hitting in 2020, causing numerous delays on getting hardware out of various parts of the world. So it's things like that that mean that it's very, very difficult. You can do your best to predict and put budgets in place, but you need to be willing to compromise and move deadlines. And then when it comes to the customer implications of that, you need to be able and be confident to have like honest conversations with them, saying, "Hey, look, we've had a delay because of this and this and this. We're not going to be able to ship next week. It's going to be another month. It's going to be another 2 months." And most of the time, at least in my experience, customers are appreciative of the honesty, because they themselves understand that anything can come up and cause disruption. So everyone's dealing with this throughout the whole supply chain, in all industries, in all jobs. So being confident in like telling the truth basically is kind of the best way to get through a delay, and it's served us well to this point. And it's something that caused numerous headaches in my previous roles, where CEOs, CTOs were unwilling to have that honest conversation with a client, and that meant that people were doing 18-hour days to try and ship a product that the customer wasn't even going to use the next day anyway, because they themselves have had a delay. So I think that's my 2 cents on it, is that you just need to be willing to do the best you can, but be willing to move those.
Awesome, thank you. Belfer, would you like to ask your question? It's not in the chat.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Can you guys hear me? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, I do have. I wanted to ask for your guidance in sort of my scenario. Um, so I'm from the aviation world. I'm an aircraft mechanic. I don't have any coding skills, or mostly like hand skills, but no connections with the engineering or computer world. But I did come up a while ago with some sort of an idea that I have checked and it doesn't exist anywhere. I've done like conduct a massive research, and basically that sort of service is not exist. And I try to sort of take a step forward and assist AI to build some sort of the app that will provide that service. But obviously, from lack of technological skills, I failed. Um, I have tried to sort of, when you have an idea and you don't want to share it yet because it has a massive potential, but you don't want to put it straight out there that someone might not take it from you, because the problem is with some ideas, they are not patentable, if that makes sense. And you just have that fear. And I try to the problem is I'm very good at presenting it face to face using voice, but when it comes down to writing, you gotta be a bit more specific, and this is where your idea might get stolen or
I
adopted.
might I might
Yeah.
just jump in with an Antler view 2 cents on that one, because it is something that we do hear a lot, people feeling nervous about
Hmm.
sharing their ideas, and in case it gets stolen. Um, I want to level it out for everybody. What you're thinking is a brand new innovation is probably not. There is probably someone in a garage, or a WeWork, or someone working on something very similar. Ideas are nothing. Execution is everything. And so, I mean, obviously, from an investor point of view, we don't invest in competing businesses. We invest in a similar area, particularly if people are going after different pockets of money and things like that. But unfortunately, and I know it's your idea and you're very proud of it and it's your baby, but ideas are nothing without execution. I'd love to, throw to Alex on what you think about that, particularly jumping on Adam's idea.
Yeah, I think it's always it's a great point with regard to feeling like you might have your idea stolen. But just ripping off what Rachel has just said is, I've always felt, and I think it's generally the thesis for the industry, that it's better to build in public than quietly. So I would almost encourage you to talk to as many people as possible, because at some point you'll come across someone who's like, oh, I love this idea. Can I help you out with it? And that person becomes your co-founder, and that person brings technical expertise that you need to bring this product to life. So it's very much, yeah, it's about the execution of it, and it's a lot easier when you can communicate that idea with people freely, and riff off the feedback that everyone gives you, because everyone's going to have their 2 cents on that idea, and you might even come across something that you haven't even thought of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Look, I totally agree with that. And again, from an Antler point of view and 2 cents, and I would love for both of you to throw in after this as we kind of go to close up, is that the Antler experience is quite a unique professional experience in the fact that it's a very diverse group of people that you get in a room. So, and by diversity, I mean, not just like, countries, backgrounds, and things like that, just ways of thinking, deep domain expertise, and those sorts of things. And particularly if you're already building something, there's a tendency to get a bit tunnel visioned on it. So being able to share this with people that have no idea what you're working on, and being able to explain it to them in a way that they understand, but also you've got access to their networks, you've got access to their commercial expertise if you're lacking that. It's a really truly unique perspective, and we're very passionate about making a space where people feel safe and secure to share their ideas without, oh God, someone's going to steal it, because that's not what we're about here. So I'd love to, as we're sort of closing things out, some final words from Tim. I'll throw to you first, just on being really open to share your ideas, but also jump on other people's ideas and give your perspective, and like from a cohort perspective, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that for you.
Yeah, that was actually probably one of the most enjoyable parts of
Yeah.
Antler, is the openness of everyone being able to share your ideas and get honest feedback from people. Because I don't think there's anything, yeah, like I think this has been mentioned plenty of times before, right? But like
Mm.
the whole, ideas are this time a dozen, but really, like I would say also it's all about the execution, as you said, Rachel, first of all. And then I think the other thing is like the way that I also think about it is like, if everyone has this idea, is it the problem that is hard to execute, and what makes you that right founder to solve that problem? So we also think about like the problem founder market fit, right? So I talk about like
Yeah.
problem founder fit, but like what is that? Why are you the right person to solve this problem as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is special in that case. I think that's something that I learned through the program. I think going back to being able to share, like everyone has different ideas in the cohort, and when you go to pitch your ideas, you often, like I was working on, I guess, manufacturing and different problems within manufacturing for a number of years before I jumped on this idea. And so hearing people from adjacent industries thinking about what they thought about like the problem space as well was really interesting, was actually really valuable.
Mm.
Because you, like you say about that tunnel vision, but it's like being open to those different perspectives and giving you a fresh view on something that you've not thought about as well. Also, one of the great things about Antler is their ability to also attract exited founders, people who have been through it, and can kind of like save you a lot of time, painful as it might be, but like there's probably no shortcuts, but at the same time, they've gone through something very similar, right? And so they
Yeah.
are able to, they have that opportunity to look ahead what's around the corner, and they go, okay, well, this problem, right? It's either made up or something else, right? So either move on, or like
Yeah.
this is actually something that's worth solving. Those are the types of things that are really good. So I think that maybe my closing remark is think about and also start to try to network with people who are almost like one or two steps in front of you, and think
Yeah.
about how you can learn from them.
And that's why we bring you in to do masterclasses now, Tim. Thank you very much. Alex, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, just on what Tim said with regard to meeting people who are one or two steps ahead. The original idea I brought in was, I guess, in the first few weeks, I was finally convinced to let it go because I had spoken to people who had been down that same route and had run into issues as well. And it also was, a bit of a hit to the ego to say, okay, this idea is not going to work, and unfortunately, I need to part ways with it. It did free me up to look at different things, look at different ideas, and that was fun as well. Actually coming into conversations with other potential co-founders and then saying, oh, love your idea. Where can I help out? And yeah, once I was comfortable letting go of that idea, it was a lot easier. Jumping on board with Adam and Ulrich eventually.
That's a really great point that I'm going to close out on, because it is such an uncomfortable environment to put yourself in, because it is unknown, it is risky. There's all these new people, there's louder personalities. If you're naturally introverted, it's a little bit confronting, so you hold on to your idea because that's your comfort. Because that's what you know and you feel confident in talking about. So I think that's a really great point. Like, obviously, anyone coming to do a residency program like this, whether it's with us or somebody else, you're coming in with something. It might not be fully fleshed out, but something that you want to explore. And it's hard to say goodbye to that because that's your comfort blanket. But that's such a great point, Alex. Like, as soon as you kind of like, oh, okay, it's not going to fly, I'm open. And I will say that Alex was a little bit belle of the ball for his cohort. And so as soon as he dropped that idea, dance card was full. So it was a bit of a coup when Adam landed you in the end. I know we've run over time, so I am going to wrap up here. Rani's very kindly put all of our LinkedIn profiles into the chat and everything, and the recording will be made available on the website. Thank you, Alex and Tim, again for your time this afternoon and sharing all your insights. I love these chats because it's so honest and no frills, and so I really appreciate you sharing your experience. For everybody that joined today, applications are open. I hope you enjoyed. Happy to have any questions, ping us on LinkedIn. With that, have a lovely hump day, also known as one of our portfolio companies.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye.
Hey.
Thank you.